Hello, welcome to God's Wisdom for Working Women. I am your host, Madrilyn Parham. The purpose of this channel is to provide biblical content and biblical solutions for women as they face critical workplace issues. Today's video will look at some leadership essentials. We won't cover every leadership issue, but we will cover some that are helpful for any leader. Well, one might think I never want to be in a leadership role. Some of the views regarding leadership range from, you can have it, it's not for me, it's not worth the money, and some would go as far to say, I would rather be a Walmart greeter. On the other hand, there are those who aspire to leadership. They want the opportunity to lead and manage people, to implement a vision, to set things in motion, and to create something new and innovative. Let's face it, leadership is challenging, while managing people can be overwhelming. So at times, leaders deal with more people problems than the actual problems associated with the job. It causes some leaders to just give up and quit. They conclude that the problems are just not worth it. For others, they view problems more as an opportunity rather than adversity. Nehemiah is an example of not being discouraged by adversity, but by persevering through it. With that being said, God has called some to be leaders, whether on a large scale or on a small scale. You might be a leader in your home, your church, your community, your school, a big business, a multinational corporation, and even government. These entities and others are some of the areas where people lead others. So we must agree that leadership is essential. So as we look at scripture, we look at leaders like Moses, Joshua, Nehemiah, Hezekiah, Ahab, David, Saul, Solomon, Deborah, Miriam, Esther, Paul, Timothy, John the Baptist, and Jesus Christ. The first leader we see in scripture is Adam. He was charged with taking care of the garden and leading his wife. That was his responsibility. However, we see the failure of Adam's leadership and what is set in motion for humanity: depravity and sin. We see Adam not manning up and telling Eve what God had said. Instead, he goes along with her wrongdoing, and we see how Adam allows the serpent to engage in a conversation with his wife, instead of telling the serpent, leave my wife alone, and saying to Eve, honey, let's go home. So we can look at Moses. Dwight L. Moody, the theologian, said this about Moses. Moses spent 40 years thinking he was somebody, 40 years learning he was nobody, and 40 years discovering what God can do with a nobody. So this description of Moses by Moody should eliminate this I got this attitude. No, you don't got it. Take it from Moses. He was a nobody that God used mightily. Moses had to endure the constant grumbling and complaining of masses and masses and masses of people who at times blamed him for everything that went wrong. I mean, everything. In other words, things that they were really angry at God about, they took it out on Moses. And on top of all of that, he had to adjudicate their personal issues at times. He served as a judge for them at times, not to mention the dissension and animosity from his own sister and brother. Yet Moses' leadership was so unique, for Exodus 33:11 says this: the Lord would speak to Moses face to face as one speaks to a friend. That's what scripture says about Moses. Well, I'm not much of a TV person. I love track and field, and the TV series that I enjoy the most is Chicago Fire. I've learned a lot about rescue and truck rolls on Chicago Fire, but what really impresses me about this series is the leadership lessons that I learned, and that the leadership lessons that this series provides. If you know anything about Chicago Fire, you know that the battalion chief of Firehouse 51 is Wallace Bowden, and he has a squad lieutenant and a truck captain. Okay, so all three of these individuals have distinct leadership roles, but make no mistake about it. Chief Bowden makes it clear Station 51 is his firehouse. Okay, everybody falls in line. So when anyone new comes on board, Chief Bowden introduces himself. He lets the individual know this. He lets them know his leadership style, and he always says this to new employees: I say what I mean the first time, and I don't repeat it. In other words, there's no reading between the lines. Everybody knows the chief. Everybody knows the chief. He allows those under him to lead in their distinctive units. He expects unity among his leadership team while welcoming differing points of view. But make no mistake about it, Chief Bowden is in charge of Firehouse 51. So I use this reference to Chicago Fire for two reasons. In the realm of leadership, first of all, someone has to be in charge, and everybody needs to know it. Everyone needs to know who is in charge, and second, others need to find roles who answer to the person at the top. So today we're going to look at 3 areas of leadership: discipline, insight, and discretion. Discipline, insight, and discretion. The first area is discipline. Well, discipline is defined as the humbling of oneself to receive the necessary instructions to form proper habits of behavior. Proverbs 25:28 says this: a man without self-control is like a city broken into and left without walls. That's the description of a person without self-control. So a leader who is not disciplined in their speech, their private life, their professional life, and their thought life, they're left vulnerable to all types of devices such as marital infidelity, greed, and pride, to say the least. Leaders need discipline in controlling their time management. They need discipline in character building, and they need discipline in relationship building. So a disciplined leader should not be a procrastinator. He or she should not be one who puts things off to the last minute. So employees who work with this type of leader, they experience a lot of frustration because it places additional stress on them, additional pressures on the team members who are prepared so hard to meet deadlines. Leaders need discipline and not be procrastinators. Leaders also need discipline in character building. Be a big enough person to say, I was wrong and I'm sorry. Don't think you're always right because you're the leader. Be man or woman enough to admit you were wrong and learn from it. Your employees will respect you for this character trait. They would definitely respect you for this. So then a leader has to be disciplined in relationships. They have to be disciplined in relationships. For some, this is easy, whereas for others, it is not quite so easy. Leadership can be lonely. And when you are lonely at the top, all types of things can happen. Remember when David should have been at war, and he stayed home instead? Well, I'm sure you know the story, David and Bathsheba. That occurred because David was not where he was supposed to be. So have a relationship with people who will hold you accountable and don't resist it. Discipline yourself for accountability. Discipline yourself for accountability. Don't resist it. It will help you stay out of a lot of trouble. Okay, the second area is insight. Insight is the ability to see what the real issue is. In other words, to see underneath the surface of things. Proverbs 8:14 says, I have counsel and sound wisdom. I have insight. I have strength. So we see that scripture makes it very clear that counsel, sound wisdom, and insight are signs of strength. Not the I got this mentality, not that, but insight from God is a sign of strength. This is why this channel is called God's Wisdom for Working Women. We want the wisdom of God. Insight is an essential skill in resolving employee conflict, for it requires listening and obtaining facts. Having insight into a complex or difficult situation helps one to understand it and determine the best course of action in resolving the conflict. An example in scripture of a person who had insight was Rahab. Rahab was a woman with deep spiritual insight. She recognized the difference between the true God of Israel and the gods that she had previously served and worshipped. Rahab saw that the God of Israel was the true God, that he was the true God, and she responded to her faith in the true God by hiding the spies. Rahab responded to her faith by hiding the spies. Rahab was able, with the help of God, to see underneath the surface, to see the real issues that were in her life, which led ultimately to her salvation and to her family's salvation as well. You know, it's surprising what insight does. It uncovers real needs in ourselves as well as others. Ask God to help you get beyond service issues with employees who are dealing with conflict. Additionally, use this as a tool to teach them and to help them learn lessons that will benefit them and will benefit the organization at the present time and in the future. The third and final issue is discretion. Discretion is giving thought to your actions before acting in order to make a right decision with understanding. Well, you've heard the saying, think before you speak, and you've also heard the saying, look before you leap. When I think of these things, they have the theme of discretion in mind. So if I say or do this, what will be the consequence for me and for others? Proverbs 2:11 says this: discretion will protect you. Understanding will guard you. Discretion will protect you and understanding will guard you. So with leaders having to make so many decisions all the time and sometimes at a short notice, they have to use discretion. You know, wise leaders have learned discretionary skills from other leaders. They've learned it from their own mistakes, and they've learned skills from the mistakes of others. So nevertheless, a leader has to give thought to their actions. You have heard the phrase, let cool heads prevail. Let cool heads prevail. Well, this could not have been depicted better in Scripture than in 1 Samuel 25, when David asked for compensation for his service to Nabal. Okay, so David sent his messengers to Nabal with a polite request. They had done the work. He sent them with a request. David told his messengers, go to him, go in my name, greet Nabal, say peace to you, peace on your house. So David's messengers did exactly as he told them to do, and they waited on Nabal's response, which was this: who is this David? Who is this son of Jesse? Many servants are breaking away from their masters these days. Okay, why should I take my bread and water and the meat I have slaughtered from my shearers and give it to men coming from who knows where? You can imagine how David's men felt. So David's men, they turned around and they went back home. When they arrived, they reported everything to David. And David said this to his men. He said, look, each of you strap on your sword. So they did. And David strapped on his own sword as well. And about 400 men went up with David, while 200 stayed with the supplies. So David and his men were ready to fight. No questions asked. David was saying, you won't talk to my men this way. And furthermore, you didn't even pay me. So we work for you and we want to be paid. In other words, David said, game on. No cool heads there. But there was a cool head, a servant and Nabal's wife, Abigail. Abigail's servant told her what had happened, and she acted quickly, but she did not tell her husband. So when Abigail saw David, she quickly got off her donkey. You know the story, she got supplies to give him. She got off her donkey. She bowed down before David with her face to the ground. She fell at David's feet and she said, pardon your servant, my Lord, and let me speak to you. Hear what your servant has to say. Please pay no attention, my Lord, to that wicked man Nabal. Okay, he is just like his name. His name means fool, and folly goes with him. And as far as me, your servant, I did not see the men my Lord sent. I didn't see them. And so she says, and now, my Lord, as surely as the Lord your God lives, and as you live, since the Lord has kept you from bloodshed and from avenging yourself with your own hands, may your enemies and all who are intent on harming my Lord be like Nabal. And let this gift which your servant has brought to my Lord be given to the men who follow you. So David said to Abigail this. It's beautiful. He said this: Praise be to the Lord, the God of Israel, who has sent you today to meet me. May you be blessed for your good judgment and for keeping me from bloodshed this day and from avenging myself with my own hands. Otherwise, as surely as the Lord, the God of Israel lives, who has kept me from harming you, if you had not come quickly to meet me, not one male belonging to Nabal would have been alive by daybreak. Okay, so did you notice David thanked Abigail for her good judgment? Did you notice he thanked her for her judgment? So Abigail prevented a major disaster from occurring by using good judgment. Leaders must do the same. Will they do it perfectly? Absolutely not. However, wisdom from God must be sought in handling difficult matters. I'll say it again. Wisdom from God must be sought in handling difficult matters. It's always good to stop and think, for once actions are done, they cannot be reversed. God will definitely provide His mercy and grace, but the consequences remain. Use discretion. Think how your actions will affect others and the organization. We cannot begin to cover every aspect of leadership, but I believe if a leader begins with these three elements: discipline, insight, and discretion, the other areas will fall in place. So all three of these elements fall under the umbrella of God's wisdom, which God so freely gives to all who ask of Him. So again, the first element is discipline, which is the humbling of oneself to receive the necessary instruction to form proper habits of behavior. That's discipline. The second element is insight, which is the ability to see what the real issue is, to see underneath the surface of things. That's insight. And the third element is discretion, which is giving thought to your actions before acting in order to make a right decision with understanding. Discipline, insight, and discretion. Some leadership essentials. Next time, we will look at the issue of why am I always looked over for a promotion? Why am I always looked over for a promotion? Why can't I get ahead on my job? This will be our topic next time. As always, if you have been encouraged by this video, I ask that you will subscribe to this channel and be sure to click the notification tab so you can be notified of upcoming videos. I can be reached at wisdomforworkingwomen@gmail.com. Again, I am your host, Madeline Parham, and remember this: God's wisdom is at work in you. Thank you so much for joining me. See you next time. God bless you.